Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. If you're new here, welcome. Please make sure that you are subscribed to worldaffairsandcontext.com for the latest updates. Many states are now preparing to retaliate against President Trump's reciprocal tariffs. I just uploaded a video yesterday on China striking back with a 34% tariff on all U.S. imports, and they also launched export controls in retaliation. This followed Trump's imposing 54% tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, the European Union is next. A longtime ally of the United States, the European Union is gearing up to escalate the economic battle. On April the 14th, the EU Commissioner will meet with Chinese and Vietnamese leaders in Hanoi, in Vietnam, to discuss trade. A quite unexpected turn of events, of course, and there's really nothing that unites people better than the common adversary, isn't there? U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 20% tariff on the EU as part of a reciprocal tariff batch that was launched on April the 2nd. Ursula von der Leyen, EU Commission President, announced that the EU is actually prepared to retaliate, but first, she said, they would really like to negotiate a deal. She also said that adding tariffs would, quote, harm consumers around the world and also increase the cost of groceries, medicine, and transportation. You know what? I never thought I would say this, but she is correct here. She's absolutely right. While she didn't really specify what the deal that they are pursuing would be, it is clear that the EU is quite desperate. With these new tariffs, its economic instability and recession and economic turbulence will only deepen. Effective April the 12th, Brussels will retaliate against steel and aluminum tariffs by imposing additional taxes on up to 26 billion euros worth of US goods shipped to the EU. Also, the EU is preparing to impose retaliatory tariffs against the 25% tariff that Trump just announced on vehicle exports. Here's the clip where Ursula von der Leyen says the EU would rather negotiate, but it is also prepared to escalate. Take a look.
President Trump's announcement of universal tariffs on the whole world, including the European Union, is a major blow to the world economy. I deeply regret this choice. Let's be clear-eyed about the immense consequences. The global economy will massively suffer. Uncertainty will spiral and trigger the rise of further protectionism. The consequences will be dire for millions of people around the globe, also for the most vulnerable countries, which are now subject to some of the highest US tariffs. The opposite of what we wanted to achieve. The tariffs will also hurt consumers around the world. It will be felt immediately. The costs of doing business with the United States will drastically increase. And what is more, there seems to be no order in the disorder. At the same time, we are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel. And we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests. I know that many of you feel let down by our oldest ally.
Even Giorgia Meloni, Italian Prime Minister, who is one of Trump's European allies, I suppose I could say that, or someone who's very much aligned with Trump in Europe, she said the tariffs are not appropriate for either side and that she would really like to avoid a trade war. So there is still some common sense in Europe. The most recent economic data suggests that the EU's biggest trade partners are the United States and China. So it is a tough position to be, you would agree. The United States is the EU's largest trading partner in terms of goods and services combined. The EU and the United States have extensive trade relations covering a broad range of sectors, including manufacturing, technology, agriculture, and services. Now, all of these areas are under additional 25% duty. So let's quickly take a look at some numbers to help quantify what I just shared. In 2024, the EU exported 532 billion euros in goods to the United States and imported 333 billion euros of goods, resulting in a 198 billion euros trade surplus. Beginning in 2020, as the EU increasingly acted against its own economic interests and sovereignty, one would argue, the dependence of the European Union on the United States in terms of trade exports systematically increased year after year. Here's how Trump's tariffs on the EU will impact the United States population. The top EU export into the United States are pharmaceuticals and medical products, followed by a variety of categories related to vehicles and machinery. The cost of healthcare in the United States has been literally unaffordable for millions of Americans and those who reside here in the United States. Now, pharmaceuticals will become even more expensive under the new trade regime as the result of the new tariffs that were just imposed by the Trump administration. So, suffice it to say that healthcare will become completely out of reach for millions of Americans and the most vulnerable groups in the US population. Trade between the EU and the United States is vital, of course, with the US being a major destination for EU exports such as machinery, chemicals, and vehicles, while the EU imports electronics, agricultural products, and oil from the United States. They also have strong investment ties, with both the United States and the EU being key sources of foreign direct investments for each other. What will escalations in a trade conflict between the EU and the United States lead to? In this video, I would like to focus on three key areas. Potential impact of a US-EU trade war include a massive economic impact with millions of consumers and workers affected. A full-scale trade war could harm businesses on both sides of the Atlantic, increasing costs for consumers, disrupting supply chains, and potentially leading to a decline in trade volume. Second, it would also have geopolitical consequences. Trade tensions would likely weaken the political and economic cooperation between the United States and the EU. Of course, it goes without saying that these bilateral relations are already quite tense, to say the least, given that President Trump announced his plans to exit WTO, World Trade Organization, and potentially he wants to limit U.S. engagement in NATO, among other things. The EU wants to continue funding the proxy conflict in Ukraine, while Trump has his eyes on other areas of the world where tensions are clearly escalating. And of course, here I'm referring to his recent threats made to Iran, which of course doesn't really serve the interest of the United States, but it does serve the interest of a foreign actor located in the Middle East who's been desperate to start a war with Iran. In addition to that, the US-EU trade war will have industry-specific impact. Certain industries, such as automotive, agriculture, and aerospace, could actually face significant disruptions due to new tariffs, due to changing trade rules, and of course, regulatory differences. So let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on this escalating trade tensions and the recent tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. Let me know what you think about those, whether you feel that consumers in your country would be affected, and if so, how. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Make sure that you are subscribed to worldaffairsandcontext.com for the latest content. And remember to show your support here, like, subscribe, and share. It goes a long way. And I will see you back here soon. Bye for now.